may be sitting here and you're thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing in here? I don't even know how to find my way around the Bible. I have to look up the books of the Bible in the table of contents. And teaching, I could never get up in front of anybody. But I want you to think of our Papa and how sometimes God has places for people who would never dream that they would be the ones to pass on truth. Because honestly, sometimes there's just no one else there to do it, and it's you. So I want to give you some helps tonight, if you're that person, that will help you. My father-in-law, as far as I know, never went to any seminars on teaching the Bible. It was all just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and learn it yourself with the Holy Spirit. But we would like to give you some practical helps. Now, some of you may actually have a gift of speaking or teaching, but you haven't done it because it's scary or you're young or inexperienced. And when I think of that situation, I think of Timothy, who is someone we've been learning about on Sunday mornings. Timothy was in that situation. He was young. He had traveled a lot with Paul. He didn't have a lot of experience. And when Paul kind of shoved him out of the nest and put him in this church, he was obviously a little scared. You can tell from the things Paul says to him that he was scared. So you may be in that place. And again, I'm just hoping that something, even if it's just one thing that I say tonight, will encourage you, will help you, will give you one more tool in your belt to study better, to understand the Bible more, understand the God of the Bible better, and maybe, just maybe, use your words to pass along some truths to somebody else. We're going to look at a study method first, and then we're going to look at a teaching method. So all of us are called to be students, and that's just the way it is. If you look in 2 Timothy chapter 2, Timothy is one of those little books. You have the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts, Romans, and then you have all the books that Paul wrote. 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and then you get into the T's. And sometimes I have to go through that little song that we teach children so I can remember where some of these little books are. But Paul wrote 1st and 2nd Timothy and 1st and 2nd Thessalonians and Titus, and so they're all after the other books that we mentioned. But in 2 Timothy 2, Paul says to Timothy, do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a workman who does not need to be ashamed and who correctly handles the word of truth. That was one of my first memory verses when I was one of those people who had to look in the table of contents to find my way around the Bible and get to a book. My version said, study to show yourself approved. There's no doubt about it, studying is hard. But hopefully there will be some tips here that will help you. The first thing, the word that I put on here, and I may get back to these other verses in a minute, but I'm giving you the word homiletics, kind of an old-fashioned word. It used to be that when people taught a short lesson on the Bible, it was called a homily. And so when you were learning how to break a passage down, figure out what it says, and how you can study it and teach it, that was homiletics. There's a homiletical method that I have found very, very useful, very practical. And it's kind of like an hourglass for the way it takes information and takes a lot of details, helps you narrow it down to find the main point of those details, and then shows you how to broaden it out into applications for your life. So that's what I'm going to teach you. And honestly, I wish I'd known this. I was an English teacher. Wish I'd known this when I was in high school and college and even teaching, because this method has done more for helping me take any kind of information in an article or anywhere, read it, figure out what the details are, what the main points are, and then think what I'm going to do with what I've learned. So that's our beginning. If you'll look at your sheet, you see the hourglass on your study sheet, your note sheet. I'm sorry, not that one, the other one, the first one. There are 5 things that we're going to look at, 5 components that I think will help you be a better student of the Bible, a better student of anything, really. And they are the content list, divisions, summary sentence, and practical applications. The content list is simply when you look at a passage, any passage, you look at all the verses and you figure a way to take little notes on those and you just list it out. You just list it out verse by verse. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, you're just taking notes. You're paying attention to any words that you see that might be repeated from verse 1 to verse 5. You might see it again, or maybe a word you've never heard before. You want to note that. You're just listing. When you get to the divisions, what you're doing in that part is you're looking back over your list of all the little detailing facts that you've noted, and you're bracketing verses to see where a change of thought or subject occurs. Okay, I don't know what happened to... There they are. Okay, yay. So we're gonna talk about how to do this. Then we'll look at the summary sentence, because what you really want to do when you're looking at any kind of passage is see what unifies all this. What is this whole thing about? And put that in one sentence. Now, the tricky thing is try to do it in a short sentence, like 10 words. If you can do that, you've got the heart of the passage. And then go from there to, why do you think God put this passage in the Bible? What was the original author's intention? That's the aim. And then from there, what Brent calls the next steps, the action steps. What am I going to do because of what I've learned out of this passage? Practical applications. Okay. The hardest thing on here for me, I can do details. Details are sort of my thing in all of life. I'm really good at details. Where I have problems is backing up and seeing the forest. I can see all the trees. I can see all the leaves on all the trees. I miss the forest. So for me, the hardest thing is to back up and get that summary sentence and then think, okay, back up, look at the forest. Why is this in the Bible? Why would God put this here for his people to read? What is the point of this? Move from the details to something bigger. I want to ask you to practice something. You can just raise your hand. As far as the subject sentence, let's just imagine we were making one for the Bible as a whole. If you were creating a subject sentence, a summary sentence for the story of the Bible, give it a shot. Somebody just give it a shot. We'll probably have to work on it, but what would you say? Okay, lots of takers, God's
okay.
Word. What?
God's Word.
God's Word. Okay. So what's the story, start to finish? What's it about?
Creation of man.
Okay. Starts with creation, doesn't it? Moves from there.
The relationship.
Relationship. Very good. Okay. And then there was a problem. What was the problem that broke the relationship? Sin. And then what?
The birth, death, and resurrection.
Jesus. Yeah. Redemption. And then, of course, in the very end, the promise of us, with a perfect relationship again with him. So if you had to somehow get all that into one sentence, can you think how you'd say it? the story of how God saved his people. Okay. That's the whole Bible, really. You could make it longer if you wanted to and say the Bible is the story of God's creation of people, comma, their fall, comma, and his redemption of them for an everlasting relationship. Okay, that's a really long sentence, but you get what I'm saying? So that would be a sentence summary. And the only difference in what you're going to be doing tonight, playing around with this and practicing it, you're just going to do it on one chapter. One chapter that's only got about 13 or 14 verses in it. So I'm going to let you play around with reading those verses and practice coming up with a summary sentence for it. Now, aim, if you had to think, why did God give us the Bible? What was the purpose of the Bible? And you were trying to transmit that to somebody else. Say you're talking to a group and you're charged with talking to them about the subject that you've just said. What would you want them to go away knowing? You would want your audience to go away having learned that. What about God? What kind of God is he?
Forgiving.
That we have a forgiving God. You might add some more adjectives. What else? He's a creator God. He's what?
Loving.
Loving.
Faithful.
Faithful. Sacrificial. Yeah. All those things. So if you would want people who had not encountered the Bible to walk away, you might be praying, Lord, I'm going to talk to them about the Bible tonight, the whole Bible, and its purpose. I'm just praying that they are going to know you, the author of this thing, the creator of us, the one who loves us, who's made a way for us to come back into relationship with you when we blew it. Okay, so that's the difference between a summary sentence and an aim. Okay. Why don't we look at Ezra, which is back in the Old Testament. And I declare, every time I look for it, it takes some looking because I always forget where it is. Once you find it, you stick a little something in there so you'll have it for the rest of the fall. But when Kim asked me to talk to you a little bit about how to study and how to build a teaching talk, my idea was, well, why don't I just take you to a passage that you're actually going to be studying? And we'll just do some beginning study on it, and I'm going to show you how you can break it down. And then, when we get to it in a few weeks, I'm going to come back and I'm going to teach it so that you can see how I took all the stuff that we did tonight and probably stealing a lot of the good ideas that y'all come up with and turn it into a talk. So it'll be a little bit of closure. You can learn how to do it, we can practice it, and then you'll actually see or hear it done in a few weeks. So we're at Ezra 3, and I am not going to attempt to read this with my voice suddenly just going out on me. It does this every time I try to teach. Is there anybody who would start us out, who would read? It's really not that many verses. 13 verses. Anybody feel up for that? If you don't want to read the whole thing, read until you get tired of reading and then we'll get somebody else. Anybody got a good reading
Christy, I'll do
voice?
it, but I won't be able to pronounce those first few words.
That is okay.
There are some bad words. I mean, not good words, but bad. When the 7th month came and the Israelites had settled in their towns, the people assembled as one man in Jerusalem. Then Joshua, son of Jozadak, priest, and Jerubbaal, son of Shilil, see, I told you, and his associates began to build the altar of God of Israel, to sacrifice burnt offerings on it in accordance with what is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Despite their fear of the peoples around them, they built the altar on its foundation and sacrificed burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and evening sacrifices. Then, in accordance with what is written, they celebrated the Feast of the Tabernacles with the required number of burnt offerings prescribed for each day. After that, they presented the regular burnt offerings, the new moon sacrifices, and the sacrifices for all the appointed sacred feasts of the Lord, as well as those brought as free-will offerings to the Lord. On the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, though the foundation of the Lord's temple had not yet been laid. Want me to keep going?
No, you fill it.
Rebuilding the temple. Then they gave money to the masons and carpenters and gave food and drink and oil to the people of Sidon and Tyre, so that they would bring cedar logs by sea from Lebanon to Joppa, as authorized by Cyrus, the king of Persia. In the 2nd month of that 2nd year, after their arrival at the house of God in Jerusalem, Jerubbaal of Shilhil, Jeshua son of Josephat, and the rest of their brothers and priests and the Levites and all who had returned from the captivity to Jerusalem began to work in appointing the Levites 20 years of age and older to supervise the building of the house of the Lord. Jeshua and his sons and brothers, and Kadmiel and his sons, descendants of Hodaviah, and the sons of Hemdad and their sons and brothers, all Levites, joined together in supervising those working on the house of God. When the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, the priests in their vestments and trumpets, and the Levites, the son of Ashba, with cymbals, took their places to praise the Lord, as described by King David, king of Israel. With praise and thanksgiving they sang to the Lord. He is good, his love to Israel endures forever. And all the people gave a great shout of praise to the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. But many of the older priests and Levites and family heads who had seen the former temple wept aloud when they saw the foundation of this temple being laid, while many others shouted for joy. No one could distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sound of the weeping, because the people made so much noise, and the sound was heard far away.
Thank you. Do you feel like you just landed on the moon? That's very foreign. The whole story seems very foreign, doesn't it? And lots of details. Let me just remind you, the whole topic is fixer-upper, remember? And what we're going to learn is that God's people, the people of Israel, had been sent off to captivity because they had strayed away from God. And other nations had come in and taken them over. They had been so terribly disobedient. They had worshipped idols. They had done all the things God told them not to do, all the while with this religious veneer of appearing to carry on their worship and everything for God. But it was a lie. So he punished them by sending them off to Babylon. But he promised before they went 70 years. It's only going to be 70 years. At the end of 70 years, I'm going to bring my people back. And so this story picks up where God, through just miraculous things, ways that he worked in the rulers who didn't even know God, to bring about, he still does this, doesn't he? Doing things that you can't even believe could happen. But he brings this remnant back. Not everybody. A lot of the Jews didn't want to come back. By 70 years later, they were happy. They liked where they were. They didn't want to give all that up and come back to Israel, but some did. These are the ones who did, and it was rough. They got back, and everything was decimated. The temple that had once been so glorious was just rubble on the ground. It was disaster. So the story picks up in chapter 3, where they've now been there for a couple of months, and they are finally getting their feet under them, and they're going to start the fixer-upper. They're going to start the rebuilding. And so, what I want us to do is go through these verses. I think they won't seem quite as crazy and unusual if we just go through them little bit by little bit, and let's write down what you're reading in here. And you're going to tell me, and I'm going to write it down. And we're going to do our content list, which is just listing out what you're reading. Okay? That's where you start. So, especially if it doesn't make any sense, your first note-taking is going to be trying to make sense out of it, verse by verse. So, where you see, now we're to the sheet with the hourglass. So, where you see the thing that says content, list the details in order, 10 to 20, abbreviate where you can, circle, underline significant words, repeated words, notes, any questions you might come across. The deal about 10 to 20 is, here we've got, 13 verses? So we don't want to have more than 13 things on our list. Ideally, we have 13 or less because we're thinking of consolidating it, finding the train of thought where we can. So, okay, let's look at verse 1. When the 7th month came, and the Israelites had settled in their towns, the people assembled as one man in Jerusalem. Okay, so I'm just going to put a number 1 here. That's verse 1. And what am I going to write? It doesn't have to be a whole sentence. Just give me some words to put up here. So I'm just taking notes on what we're reading. What am I going to write down? Okay, people assembled. You can write this too on yours or not, but I think you want to. Okay. People assembled. What else? When?
7th month.
Okay, 7th month. Now, hang on to that. 7th month. That's not how we say things. We might want to do some research on that and find out when the 7th month was on their calendar. I'm just curious, when was that? Anything else in there? Yeah, Danielle.
I put they were unified because it said as one man.
Yeah, I love that phrase. I'm just going to put that very phrase because I like it. And as somebody who teaches and does Bible study, I like that. I like the whole idea of unity and people doing things all together like they were one. That's how God's people were meant to operate. That is way cool. Okay. And it was also in Jerusalem. And the reason for that is that's where the temple was. So they're in Jerusalem. The temple's in ruins. That's where they're starting. Okay, how about verse 2? All the names, right? You're going to get so familiar with some of these names, you're not going to stumble over them. Jeshua, there are other places that call him Joshua. So if I slip and call him Joshua, that's okay. Joshua, and his fellow priests and Zerubbabel began to build the altar of the God of Israel to sacrifice burnt offerings on it in accordance with what was written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Okay, so what's happening here? Let's just get the people in here first. I'm going to put Joshua or Jeshua and Zerubbabel. 2 B's? Yeah, 3 B's. Zerubbabel. These guys, You're going to know their names because they are the main leaders of this bunch. Joshua the priest and Zerubbabel, who's actually, I don't want to tell you too much, but he's a leader. Okay. And their associates begin to build the altar. So would you say maybe they lead in building altar? You might be wondering, why are they building the altar first? Hold that thought. Guess that'll come back. Okay, in accordance with what Moses said. Okay, I'm going to put as per Moses. Because Moses had given them earlier great detail about how the altar was supposed to be built. Okay, question 3. Verse 3. What do you learn in verse 3? Just say some of the things that you pick out of here.
Fear.
Okay. I'm going to put despite fear because the fear doesn't stop them. They feel fear, but they go ahead and do it anyway, which is really neat. That'll preach. The fear of the people around them. So, despite fear of peeps around them, just for abbreviation purposes, what do they do anyway? Yeah. They build the altar and what do they do? And they do what? Yeah, they burn offerings on it. So yeah. And there's some little details about the sacrifices, what those sacrifices are, the burnt offering and whatnot, and that's a whole lot of detail in it. In the 4th verse, what do they do? Okay, they celebrate, but they celebrate in a very special way. They celebrate with the Feast of Tabernacles, which is a special kind of feast that God had given them, a remembering kind of celebration. And they followed all the rules, didn't they? Okay, in verse 5. You know what I might do? I might lump 4 and 5. Because they're just more things that they began to do. Presenting other offerings, other sacrifices, and free will offerings. So they celebrated with the Feast of Tabernacles and other sacrifices. Okay, what do you pick up in verse 6? We're still in the 7th month. What's the one new bit of information that they put in there toward the end of the sentence?
The foundation of the temple hasn't been laid.
Okay, all this is happening, but no temple foundation So what do you kind of picture? I don't know. If you get a picture in your mind of what it must have looked like, what do you think?
All from a piece of land.
Yeah, it's just a piece of land with a lot of rubble on it. And in the middle of that rubble, they've just built an altar that they're starting to worship on. But everything else is just still in ruins. Okay. In verse 7, what do you pick up?
I mean, the giving thing was authorized by the king.
Okay.
Starting to hire people.
Yes, and starting to hire people. So they're hiring help. And where does the money look like it's coming from? Okay. Cyrus. I think some of this is their money, but some of it probably came from Cyrus, who's the guy, the king over in Babylon, who doesn't even know God. But he's the one who laid this whole thing out for these people to come back and see that God's promise to them was fulfilled. It's just pretty remarkable. In 8, okay, now we're to the second month of the second year, so some time has passed. So, time passes. They've been just doing these things, and now we've got Zerubbabel and Joshua and the priests and Levites, and what are they starting to do here?
Oversee the work.
Oh yeah, they're starting to supervise or oversee the building of the house of the Lord, which is the temple. So Joshua and Zerubbabel, priests, Levites, all the leaders now. They're on top of getting the work done, getting the temple rebuilt. They're on the same page with each other, all the leaders. And I didn't put this, let's see. So who's doing the work? That's kind of interesting. That was all the Levites 20 years old and older. In verse 9, Joshua, his sons, all these other people joined together in supervising. So, you know what? I'm just going to put verse 9 with verse 8 because that really, just a lot of their families. So I'll put their families in here too. Okay, verse 10. So, what are they doing? Okay, so when they laid the foundation, all the materials had come. That's what I guess took so long. So when they laid the foundation, there's a big one. Yeah, there's a big celebration. They've got cymbals and trumpets, and the priests are wearing all their fancy vestments and everything. So it's a big, musical, fancy celebration. Boy, they're pulling out all the stops to celebrate the beginning of this work being done.
And they were praising the Lord.
Yeah, praise praising. That's a good thing. Yeah. Praising. Now, why do you think if they're doing all the work and they're giving all the money, why do you think they're praising God here? Yeah. Yeah. The very fact that they even are getting to be there is because of a very good promise-keeping God who's bringing them back to the land that he had promised would forever be theirs. So he's brought them back.
Weren't they scared of the people around them? So
Yes.
he protected them.
Yes. That is a really good point. Yes, he had protected them thus far. They hadn't been ambushed and killed, and, it's all going forward. So, yay, God. And then in verse 11, it actually tells you a song that they sang. He is good. His love to Israel endures forever. Okay, so more singing. Actually, this could probably go in with the above. But really praising God here. And all the people gave a great shout of praise. So all, you know how that feels sometimes when you're in church and everybody is just caught up in praising God together? Do you ever just get so full and thrilled with it that you just, my eyes just start weeping. I can't help it. When my heart gets touched, I cry. I can't even imagine how wonderful this must have been, their joy and their singing. But what does it say in verse 12? There's a turn here. What does 12 say? Who was weeping? Okay, the older ones. Wept. This kind of tugs at your heart a little bit. And why did they weep?
Because they'd seen the original.
Because they had seen the other one. Older ones wept. They remembered what had been. And even in the joy of what is right now and what is to come, they're sad that what was doesn't exist anymore. And then verse 13, wow. If you ever think church gets a little bit loud, think about this verse. What's it say? Loud. I mean, really loud. It tells you in many ways how loud it was. No one could distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sound of weeping because the people made so much noise that the sound was even heard far away, because they're outside. People are hearing the sound carry. It's so loud. Okay, now, having done just this, do you feel you understand this chapter just a little bit better?
Yeah.
Just breaking it down into bite-sized pieces and making some little notes, you go, oh, okay, well, I don't feel like I'm on the moon anymore. Okay, I get it. I think I get a little grip on what's happening here. Okay, so you've already started the process of distilling the information. But I want you to look too, because the next thing we're going to do is divide this to see where the action in this thing, where the emphasis turns. So if you have an NIV Bible like I do, you are so lucky because your Bible already breaks things for you into paragraphs and sometimes headings, and that's why I love the NIV. But I used to use the New American Standard, and it doesn't do things in paragraphs. It just has all the verses listed out like this. So if you have a Bible that's kind of helped you here, where where do things change in here? Where do the paragraphs, like if you were dividing the action out, bracketing some of these verses together, where does the action change?
Verse 8.
Mine divides it between 6 and 7.
Okay, between 6 and 7. Okay, I see there is a paragraph in my Bible at 8 that starts it, but lucky me, my study Bible shows that it helps me see that all this was about what? Well, it was about the altar. Yeah. So, all that, they were just building the altar and getting going with those sacrifices. And here, it even tells you here, but there's still no temple foundation. And yet here, when you start into 7, what are they concentrating on? Yeah, they're concentrating in all the rest of this in the building. Dry erase boards very well. Okay, so let us, and now some people might want to take these last 2 because that's a very poignant part of that. I'm just going to leave them in there. But if we were going to write a little heading for this and a heading for this, just tell me in a sentence what happens here. What's happening in that first part? Just make it into a sentence, okay? What?
They were rebuilding the altar.
Okay, who? Okay, Joshua and Zerubbabel head up the rebuilding of the altar. That would be a sentence that would be perfectly great. Basically, that's all they're doing. You could make the subject of that sentence different. I'll share with you what I put. I call these people the returning remnant. That's kind of a long word, but they're only a part of Israel, and they were the part that returned. So I said, returning remnant rebuilds Jerusalem's altar and reestablishes offerings. Okay, that's a lot of words, but we could just say Israel's returnees rebuild the altar and begin using it to worship. That'd be a simple way to say it. Perfect. Okay, second part, how could you put that into a sentence? Temple foundation laid is laid. Yeah. Oh man, I love the simplicity of that. The temple foundation is laid. The first one could be the temple altar is rebuilt, and the second one, the temple foundation is laid. And then they kind of go together, don't they? Kind of fit. I put, because you remember I'm a detail person, returning remnant lays temple foundation with joy and tears, because I just wanted to get the bad and the good and the end in there. But all you're doing is trying to figure out what happened. Okay, now, let's make it into one sentence. What if we did that? Hopefully, I'm not erasing this that you hadn't already written it on your paper. So, if you were just going to write a sentence that caught this whole chapter in one sentence, what would it be? What do you want to call, what would the subject be? You could say Zerubbabel and Joshua, or you could say returning Israelites. Make it really simple. Returning Israelites. Just look at the divisions. What are they doing?
Rebuilding.
Yeah. Returning Israelites rebuild, altar, and okay. Now, it's important to note this. They don't actually rebuild the temple yet. I'm going to say they start on foundation. Uh-oh, I better put temple foundation. How many words is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wow, that's really great. We got a lot in there. The idea for this sentence is that if somebody saw that or you saw that, it would remind you, it would stick in your head, oh yeah, I know where that was. That was in Ezra where they came back into the land, they were returning. Yeah. So, you know, you've got it very specific there. How about an aim? Why do you think this chapter would be in the Bible? What would God's point be in putting this chapter in there for all the people who are going to read it in the future? The Israelites who would read it, us. You know, what is this? I'm going to say, okay, the aim, cause audience to learn that. What could you learn about? I don't know. Ah, that's a really good one. God keeps his promises. Yeah. When you read promises in Scripture and you know that you are a child of God, you can know that you know that you know that you know that God is going to keep those promises because He is a promise-keeping God. What a great thing. And what a great thing to tuck into your head to remember this story. Even when things are hard, even when you've blown it, even when things are in shambles, God's going to rebuild. He's not through with you yet. He's going to restore. He's promised. He will work in those who belong to Him, to will and to work for His good pleasure forevermore, as long as you are alive on this earth, and then we go to heaven and we get to be with Him there. So, what a great thing to learn. Okay, what about if you were just coming away from this with some applications? What sticks in your mind for something that might change the way you think or change the way you're living, affect your life somehow today? What would it be? I'm going to back up a second. I'm going to tell you what my aim was. I worked on this, and I was having a really hard time with it. This often happens with me. So this morning, I'm driving after I drop my granddaughter off at school, and it just hits me because it's been percolating around in my brain. These people didn't start working for God until they had gotten that altar straight and gotten their relationship right, and they were worshiping Him. And I thought, oh man, wow, there's a truth that we don't want to start working for God until we've got our relationship right with God. So in the morning, if I'm going to get up and I'm thinking I'm going to do things for the Lord this day, let me not go in that direction until I have spent some time at the altar, a little bit of time praying and reading my Bible. Let me not just charge out thinking, oh, I'm going to do work for God today. Not till the altar's taken care of first. Not till I've had that time first. So that was an application for me. Don't presume. Where am I presuming to work for God? And I just went charging out without even reading my Bible that morning. And I think I'm going to talk to somebody and encourage them in the Lord. And I hadn't even spent time with the Lord. That was one of my applications. Anybody else?
I put united in obedience.
I love that. I love that. Because we are more together than we are when we're apart. And He made it that way. He made us for community. So you got things out there that are frightening. Stick close to your community, to your family, and Him. I love that. And maybe a question you could ask by way of application is, hey, where do I need to connect with the people of God? And who do I know who's out there not connected? Is there somebody I know who really needs to be connected? And maybe I'm the one to reach my hand out and connect that person. That would be a great application from this. Okay. All right, well, that's just a beginning. And let me just tell you, when you do your Bible study questions, whoever writes those questions, I just about guarantee you they're doing this before they write the questions. If you do this, you can be a question writer also. That's another element to it, because it helps you really see into the heart of that passage so well. Even with kids, you know, even if you're in kids ministry or doing quiet time with your kids in the evening, or quiet time, devotional time, these things are so helpful for helping your eyes see what to say to your kids, what to bring out to your kids. Really great. Okay, what I wanted you to see on the tables is that in addition to doing this ourselves, I'd say if you were ever going to teach, always, but always start out just you and God and the Bible. Before you read another thing, just you and God and the Bible. You talk to Him and ask Him to show you what He has for you in there before you start reading what somebody else says. But after you've done that and you've done your due diligence on study, then you can read what other people say. You can look at dictionaries. So everybody wake up and look on the table. There's some books on there, and I'd love for everybody to grab a book and see what you can glean out of that book. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do this, like about 10 minutes. And not a lot. I'm just asking, open the book. If it's my book, I put a little yellow page marker in there just to help you find the spot. Read and see what you can find. Now, on your tables, I put something that should help you tell you what the books are. Sometimes just a dictionary will help you so much. Just a regular old dictionary to look a word up. For example, the word fear. You'd be surprised the insight you can get into the word fear just by looking up a dictionary definition. Okay, also on the table, there is, on most of these tables, a Bible dictionary. So if there was a term in here or a name in this chapter that you didn't get, you could be able to look it up in your Bible dictionary. You want to know what I looked up this week? Because I could not remember. And I looked it up, and what do you think? I had it all marked from the last time I looked it up, and I'd completely forgotten. But you know how in this chapter it talks about priests and Levites? I could not remember what the difference was between a priest and a Levite. And I thought, why are they talking about them as though they're separate categories? Because aren't all priests Levites? Wouldn't all Levites be priests? Aha, no is the answer. There's a little distinction. And so when I looked it up, I found, I had this very same question last time I read something like this, because there were my highlighter marks. Anyway, these things are helpful. Okay, here's your challenge. It's a scavenger hunt. You have got 10 minutes to find one thing you didn't know about Ezra 3 from whatever book you have picked. Okay. Ding, ding, ding. All right, what I want you to do, as many as we can hear from, just real quickly, just what did you find that you didn't already know? Which might be a lot if you've never looked at Ezra before. So, somebody, what did you find? Yes?
That Zerubbabel was the grandson of King Jehoiakim.
Yes.
And he would have been king had they not gone into captivity. And then Cyrus had named him governor.
Yes, and that kind of gives me chills. Because God had promised when he made David king that there would never cease to be a time that somebody in his line would, that the royal line would continue in the line of David. So even in captivity, God kept his promise. And Zerubbabel, descendant of David, ends up, he doesn't get to be a king, but he gets to be a leader, and he's got the royal blood flowing through him. So that is just really neat. Really cool. Somebody else.
There was a couple of interesting things. This is Teach the Text, or Teaching the Text. This is a fabulous book, and it just kind of went into detail. But a couple of things that mentioned at least the morning and evening sacrifices on the altar, how intentional that was to never let the fire burn out. Like there was an intention behind making it an effort to make sure that was ongoing, which I thought was neat. And then when you read the scripture, it seemed like that Cyrus, the king, was kind of giving permission, which he did, but it wasn't for the purpose of God's word and for these people. It was almost a selfish, I'm going to be the king who is over the building of all of it. It was for selfish reasons and not so much for the glory of God. So,
Yes.
interesting.
Which just goes to show you, don't be perturbed when ungodly people are at the helm, because God can work through ungodly people who have very bad motives to still see that his will gets done. That is very encouraging to share that about Cyrus. He wasn't doing this out of some sense of wanting to serve God. It was purely selfish, but God used it. Really, really good. Somebody else? Yes, Danielle.
I learned that Ezra means Yahweh helps.
That's neat. Yeah. Names are so important in the Bible, aren't they? Love that. Yes.
It talks about the seventh month was perhaps the most sacred in Israel's calendar. And then it also talks about the first day of the seventh month was a solemn rest. And it was also proclaimed as the festival of trumpets. And then
Okay.
it kind of goes along, and each day, like it talks about in here, it has a different festival. So it's like a whole festival for different days in the month.
Yes.
So it's kind of cool.
God plans festivals, celebrations all through the year to help people remember things that he had done for them and who their God was and who they were. Yeah, all those celebrations had a purpose. Now, at this table, were y'all looking up the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles? Did you ever find out what that was?
It was now the day of pilgrimage 3 times to, it was basically going to tabernacle. I think, I don't want to say that, like, for sure, but
Okay.
was that?
Anybody?
Yeah, that they would just make the pilgrimage to the tabernacle, and it was like oftentimes 3 times.
Okay.
I don't know how often, I mean, but.
Okay. Anybody else look that one up about the Feast of Tabernacles?
It was a week-long festival of booths. It goes a lot more in here than what we did. It goes on.
Actually, the origin of that, if I'm remembering right, is to remember the time that they were in the desert for 40 years. And so they would get together and they would build little makeshift tents and live in the tents to remember how God took care of them through all those years when they didn't have a home and they were traveling through a desert, and yet every day they woke up and they had manna to eat. He made sure they had water. He took care of them. And so they would get together and celebrate, remembering, kind of like we do Thanksgiving. You know, you remember the origin when you celebrate that holiday. Anybody else? Yes.
This book said that when Ezra got to Jerusalem, he kind of had to set everybody straight that some of them were not doing what they were supposed to be doing, and so he had to spend some time getting them back on course before they could start.
Yes.
Like kind of like what you were saying.
Yes. Because they were kind of
They were
not real
very
organized.
Stuff. They said they expelled all the farm wives and stuff.
Yes. After they'd been there for a while, they started doing some of the same things that had been done before that they got in trouble with God about. Cheyenne.
Piggybacking off of that, I did not know that Ezra did not show up for 7 chapters, and that was pretty cool because the whole book is named
For him. Yeah.
And I also found, whenever I found that his name means helper, that some scholars actually consider him the father of Judaism.
Interesting. That is interesting. I can't, there's something about Ezra as his writing, the writings of this book are very akin to another book in the Old Testament that they think.
It said something about that too. Yeah, it said this said that you're supposed to read Ezra and Nehemiah together.
As one.
Yeah, as
Yeah,
one.
they used to be one book until they got separated and they got different titles. Yeah. Anything else? Anything that kind of encouraged you in some way that you read? Yes.
It said that the collection of materials and the building and the timing were similar to when Solomon originally built the temple, but this time when they were done with the foundation, they celebrated with humility instead of pride, and so they learned that they need to put God above themselves and not be prideful in their own hard work.
That is really a great point. And it might help to explain a little bit why God would let this temple not be as grand as Solomon's temple, and why there would be a little, well, humility and tears to realize they were not able to build a temple like that again. But that's okay. It didn't have to be like that. Anyway, okay. Well, I think, hopefully, this just shows you there's a lot out there that you can go to find out what things are about. And what I would just say to you, though, as you're going through your Bible study this year, what we usually encourage everybody to do is try to do your study without looking at the outside helps so that everybody's on the same footing. And then you can go to look at your outside helps. But whoever's teaching, this is the kind of stuff they're going to be drawing into the teaching time, along with a real heart for how this can encourage us today, where we are. You know, there's so much in here that plays into today. Okay, so all that is study, but now I just want to tell you real quickly, if you were going to teach, so turn your Live, Love, Teach, Live, Learn, Teach sheet over and look at the back. And I've never done this before. I've never told anybody that I can think of how I have put teaching times together, how I've put lectures together. So you all are the very first, and here it is, because I like things simple. I want you to know that anytime I ever teach, I get scared to death. I really do. I get trembly and shaky, and I think, oh my gosh, what do I know? How could I be somebody who could stand up in front of anybody, tell them anything? What if I just royally bomb? I don't even know how to start. What if I say too much? What if I don't say enough? Okay, here's where I start. And this is the simple beginning that helps get me over the hump of fear. Okay, so I take 5 sheets of paper and I label them. Introduction. Division 1. Now, I don't do this anymore where I actually do it with a pen. I do it with my computer. But I start a sheet of a blank document and I put introduction. And then I put my divisions 1, 2, 3 with just nothing under them. I title it and I have nothing under there. And at the very bottom, I'll put life truth, illustration, applications, but there's nothing written there. That's for me to go back to and fill in. So I do that. If we were teaching this, yay team, it's only got 2 divisions. So instead of 3 divisions like I have on these papers, we've only got 2. And then I get to my last sheet, and guess what it says? It says conclusion. Okay, first thing I do is take that introduction sheet and the conclusion sheet, put them away. I'm not even going to go there yet. I don't know enough about this passage yet. I mean, I don't know exactly where I'm going with it. So I'm sure not going to be thinking of an introduction before I've even figured out what I'm getting out of it to put into everybody's heads. So I start with Division 1. Go back to the content list, and I start looking at my content list. What were some of the things that really stuck out to me there? Okay. It stuck out to me that there were priests and Levites, and I couldn't figure out what the difference was. It stuck out to me that they were afraid of people around them, and yet they went anyway on building. It stuck out to me that they built the altar first. It stuck out to me, and I'm just going through all those things. And sometimes I'll think, wait a minute, if I'm teaching people this, do they even know where this is on a map? Maybe I should look up a map and show it on an overhead so they can see where Babylon was and where Israel is and how far they had to travel just to get back home again. And think about what that would have meant for them to give up their homes that they'd had for 70 years and families and say goodbye to people they weren't going to ever see again and travel all this way to come back and do something because they felt God was leading them to do it. So I just work my way through the division. And after I have just mined it up, I'm not overlaying any of my thoughts on it. I'm just trying to see, what does it say? What does that mean? And what could it mean to me in my life? And I get to the end, and I write some kind of life truth that I think teaches me something about God, teaches me something about people. And then I illustrate it. I have found in teaching, people love illustrations. They love illustrations. Jesus knew that. Think of all the stories he gave where he just illustrated, and they stick in your mind. You may not remember every word, but you remember the shepherd going out after that last one little sheep and leaving the 99. You remember these illustrations that he gives. And then I try to give applications, and I usually give applications that God works over on me, because that's how it goes. When you're going to teach it, you're going to have to be living it. And so when he gives me applications, I share it. And then when I've done that for all 3 divisions, I go back and I think, what would be the overall way that I would want to introduce this? Maybe it's a story I want to tell that would hook somebody's interest. I don't know. It usually is. I'm kind of an illustrator too. So it'd probably be some kind of illustration or story. Something that I heard on the news. Something going on, today's 9/11. So maybe there would be some story from 9/11 that's somehow tied in. I mean, think of the rubble that was in New York City after the World Trade Centers were gone. Maybe that ties into the kind of rubble that these people were going back to try to rebuild and make something out of. And a lot of fear. I remember a lot of fear back in those days that it would happen again. What to our country. We've never been attacked like that on our own soil. So you can understand the fear of these people going back, and they're afraid of the people around them. Anyway, looking for things that tie in to then start teaching the lesson. And then when I get to the end, I just go back and say, what did I say in the introduction? Okay, and I'm going to tie it back up with, so, whatever, you know. We're all remembering today what that was like to try to rebuild. And we're going to continue on with these people in their rebuilding or their failure to rebuild. Because sadly, that was a lot of it, and the mistakes they made. But we're going to hang with them because God hung with them. God was faithful with them all the way through. So anyway, that's how I would do that. And the last thing I want to give you is just some things about teaching that have been helpful to me. If you found yourself teaching, here's some things I want you to know. If you were coming to me and saying, okay, you've been teaching for X many years, what would you say to me as a beginning teacher? Here's what I'd say. Number one, I would say, pray before you do anything. Just like these people built their altar first, don't launch out studying or writing or doing anything. Don't listen to John MacArthur's sermon on Ezra. Pray. You go to the altar. You ask God. Psalm 119, open my eyes, Lord, that I may see the wonderful things that are in your law, the wonderful things that are in there. Give me eyes to see those things. I'm not going to see them if you don't open my eyes. And I want to see what you want me to see, what you know these women who are listening to me or these children who are listening to me, give me eyes to see what they need, because they're going to be hearing it from me, and I want to do it right. So please, God, open my eyes. That's number one. Number two, be prepared to have all the applications go through your life first. Because they will, because he can't use you to teach anybody else and just sit on a high throne and say, you need to do this, and you need to do that, and you need to, not unless you've walked through it. You've got to walk through it too, and he'll see that you do. He'll see that you do, but only then do you have the gray hairs that enable you to be able to tell anybody else anything, because he's worked it through you first. Third, don't go to a passage and overlay onto it what you want to say. Just put that aside and trust God with it. God, what do you want me to say? Mine it out so that you're giving people what God has in there for them. Fourth, be ready to work hard studying. Studying is tough. It takes getting up a little earlier in the morning, maybe going to bed a little bit later, hitting the books when you'd rather do something else. For me, when I'm teaching, I have to put novels aside because I can't be reading murder mysteries when I'm trying to teach God's Word. It muddles up my brain. I have to just, I have to study. But my thought, what I want to encourage you is this, and what I always tell the Lord, Lord, I'm going to fill those water jars up. I'm going to fill them up to the best of my ability, but at the end of the day, it's just water. Unless you turn it into wine, God, and that's what I'm counting on. Because if you don't show up, I am sunk. All I've got to offer is water. I'm going to study hard. I'm going to fill the jars up, but only God can fill it and turn that into wine. So count on him to do that. He is so faithful to his word. He will do it. Number 5, if you ever think that you have thought of something that nobody ever thought of before, beware. It may not be correct. My husband has drilled this into my head because he teaches a lot too. He said, be sure you've read it somewhere else before you say it. And I can think of one notable time when I didn't do that. And I got corrected. of people who came up to me right afterwards and set me straight. And I deserved it because I thought I was making a connection, and I thought, oh, I'm so smart, nobody thought of this, and it was totally wrong. So I think teachers should run things by somebody else before they say it. And sometimes it hurts to have your ideas shot down, but in the long run, it's better. Number 6, have a clock. Have a clock and write the times down. And that's why I have my phone here set so that the screen won't go off and I can see what time it is, because I wrote times of the clock beside every section of these papers tonight to try to keep me on track. I tend to talk too much, and I almost always go over, but I'm really trying hard. At least I put the clock times on there. I try. Number 7, when you're teaching God's Word, be sure that the people who are listening to you have got Bibles and they're open, and you are reading things out of those Bibles and forcing them to look down at the words on the pages of God's Word. Because what happens is we get carried away telling stories and whatnot, but it's God's Word that has the power. It's God's Word. Isaiah 55 says, "My word will not return to me void or empty without accomplishing the purpose for which I've sent it." So if you're given something you just said, they might not remember it. But if you give them God's Word, it's going to reap harvest. He promises it will. It won't go out and come back again empty. Power is in God's Word, not my words. God's Word's got the power. It's living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword. So I don't want to get too carried away here in my own voice. When I'm teaching a passage of Scripture, I need to be getting Scripture into people's ears and hearts. Number 8, remember that God is the hero of the story every time. Every time. And so if I'm paying too much attention to my applications and failing to shine the light very brightly on God, on Christ, then I've done a disservice. Because it's more important to walk away with what you've learned about God, I believe, than even what you think you want to do because of what you've heard. Now, they're both important, but the most important thing, you'd have to agree, the most important thing is knowing Him better. Knowing Him better, understanding Him more. So that's got to be the top thing. Whether you are like my father-in-law, who was completely unskilled, but faithful to do what he saw needed to be done, whether or not that was his preference, whether or not that was his skill set, it needed to be done, and by golly, he was going to study, and he was going to be faithful, and he was going to get God's Word into a place where it hadn't been. Just like he had been responsible for helping those glider planes and pilots get across enemy lines when it wasn't his first choice for how he was going to serve, he was going to be faithful for getting God's Word across into areas that it hadn't been before and into people's minds where it hadn't been before. We can do that, even if it's not our gift. If we're Timothy's and we do have a gift, but we're not using it because we're fearful, oh my goodness. I hope that something out of tonight, something has put a little tool in your tool belt to take some of that fear away so you'll get out there and do it. One of the things that Timothy most talks about in that book, Paul talks about, getting the truth passed down. Do you realize we are always just one generation away from losing it all? One generation of it not being passed down to kids. That's how fragile it is. That's why God is, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, He's all about passing it on. We got to pass it on. That's our job. We've been charged with that, passing it on. And the last thing, I just want to give you this little motivation. You can look at statistics, and statistics can say anything. But I was looking up, I just Googled yesterday, what is the statistic about what you hear and what you learn and how much of it you remember? Because I wanted to look at that one more time in this study. So here it is. University of Houston says this. Only 20% of what other people tell us sticks in our brains. So you're probably going to walk away from here, and of my words, at the best, you're going to remember 20%. If you discuss what you are learning with other people, guess how much you remember? 70%. 70%. Now, doesn't that say something to you for studying and sharing it with somebody else, or coming to your discussion group and batting it around? 70% retention just from discussing things. And last of all, that tops them all, 95% retention for what you teach other people. You take what you've learned and you teach it to somebody else, 95% of it is going to stick with you. That is pretty cool, isn't it? So I am praying that y'all will all go out and be 95%ers, okay? And teach somebody somewhere.
Can you guys let me thank Christy, please?
So focused on getting started, I failed to tell you anything at all about Christy, as she was not going to teach you. A lot of you know Christy, but when I sat in my first sort of challenging Bible study, a Bible study that expected me to do more than fill in the blanks, which is what you'll discover we're hoping for as you're here. It was a Bible study that Christy was teaching, and I went to that Bible study, and honestly, I barely knew the difference between Noah's Ark and the Ark of the Covenant. So if you don't know either, that's okay. We'll get to that. But all that to say, I just had so little exposure to God's Word on my own when I started going to a Bible study. And for 9 years, Christy was my teacher. And I was adding it up over 30-something lessons a year, 10 years, 300 lessons. I've heard over 300 lessons that Christy has taught. And more than that, that she challenged me to study the Bible myself and to let the Holy Spirit be my teacher. And it's transformed my life, and I know that it will transform yours. And so I hope that just some of the study skills that she shared will be things that you will think about using as you come into this Bible study. The time the Lord will open the door for you maybe to share in a formal setting. Certainly He will open the door often for anyone who's willing to share in an informal setting with all of the people that you know. But if you noticed the emphasis of everything she said, time-wise, what she spent time on, when we finally got to the part about here's how you put it together to teach, that was 10% of what she spent her time on. 10% of the effort for teaching comes, 90% of the effort is in the studying. And so that's what you're going to be doing in Bible study. And I appreciate Christy so much. She continues to teach in whatever realm the Lord opens the door for her, and it's an inspiration for all of us to do the same thing. It's a challenge for us to do the same thing.